Hey everyone, I'm back. Let's go weird with it. Today we're talking about Doin Finds' Going to Hell, Twinks Going to Hell for Being Twinks. Before we start this, I just want to give a little warning. This album is super queer, and I am also super queer, so there's going to be a discussion of some homophobia, some transphobia, and the use of a F word that means gay. So if that makes you uncomfortable, I'll more likely than not be back tomorrow talking about something a lot less evocative. Jim O'Rourke's live in Japan. Live at Japan 2002, if I'm correct. Anyways, so you can just come back tomorrow for that video, but let's go ahead and dive into this record, because there was a lot that I took from this record. Like the first time I listened to it, I really thought it was just kind of shitpost noise punk. Like, a lot of the lyrical matter of this record can come off as either disingenuous or just trying to be funny and failing. There was a fantastic RYM review, which is just one line, and just it gave it 0.5 out of 5 stars, and the line is just, all the references in these lyrics are not going to make sense in 10 years. And assumedly they also had other gripes besides just the fact that it references things like Homestuck and epic rap battles of history and and like Twitter drama and Discord accounts and shit like that. So I assume they also had an issue with the lo-fi production, the purposeful amateurism, and a bunch of other things. I personally think that makes it cool. Like, there's no references in... Let's just focus in on the references in the first part in this record. Stuff that's commonly talked about are things like Hatsune Miku, bondage, parasocial relationships / idol worship, and kinky sex. And all of that is cool. Like, I don't want to... Well, no, all of it is cool. Hatsune Miku owns. But I don't think not... First off, no, let's talk about this. There's a song on this record called... One second, I just want to make sure I get it right. There's a song on this record called Gender Neutral Evil Mega Milk Has Been Hotel California. Fantastic name. And the person that made that RYM review had Luna from Hell of a Boss as their profile picture. So, but I think it was edited in some way, so maybe they're cool. Anyways, here's what I'm saying. This album is definitely made in a time and place. From what I understand, it's about the middle of 2020. And there's no talk about COVID on this record, too, so that doesn't even exist to date it. What interests me so much about the references in this record is how it's not like it's definitely tongue-in-cheek in places. Like, you know, for one of the interlude tracks, there's a epic rap battle of history thing being done by Homestuck Obama and regular Obama. Very, very tongue-in-cheek in that regard. There's references to, just in terms of my personal Homestuck love, there's references to like Sears, Vriska. There's just a line, and they're very audibly distorted and compressed. It's just okay, trans lesbian who likes Homestuck, and I'm just like, me. So maybe I like it because it's because it's preaching to the choir. However, I think there is a lot of interest in terms of how the references are brought out. None of it, there's no like, I don't want to say that like it's casual, that like casually mentioning, oh, hey, I need to make a new Discord account so we can better organize things, or something like that. It feels a lot more deep than just, oh yeah, hey, you guys know what Discord is? You guys know what Homestuck is? Have you heard about Homestuck? You can't stop the Homestuck. I'm gonna stop myself. Anyways, I find it so fascinating because of how this record really handles self-love, anger, disgust, and all these other facets. Multiple songs are written about sex and romantic relationships, but they're never really just one thing of like, oh, I love you. Like, there's a lot of songs in here that's like, I hate you. I hate that you make me feel the way that I feel, and I hate that you don't feel the same way about me in the fact that I can't hurt you the way that I've been hurt by you. And I love that being contrasted with with a song like, one second, just being safe, a song like Gay Australian Culture is Having a Crush on Hex from GGSP, which features the repeating lyric, this keyhole kitten lingerie scratches my chest red, and talks about Miku shirts being covered in cum that you don't want to take off because your partner says you look oh so cute with it on. The references feel messy, but in terms of, at the very least the way that I'm looking at it, in terms of someone whose life is very much the stuff they listen to, the music they like, and the shit that they read, I relate to that heavily. Of just, oh yeah, no, I was doing something really fucking stupid. Anyway, Hatsune Miku was there, and like, it just comes out naturally, and I mean, don't get me wrong, this album loves Miku. There is an entire section of this album where they talk about how Miku is the only reason they're even alive. But I feel like the lyrical subject matter really is helped by these references. It gives us more of a peek into their life. And maybe it only works as a peek into their life because I relate to them so much, to not necessarily having, I mean, I do have the, it doesn't scratch up my chest though, oddly enough. This is oddly soft for the $10 I spent on Amazon for it. Oh Lord. Anyways, I find it opens up it opens up a picture of these songs, because maybe it's because I relate with them so much, because I also am just laying in bed being a dumb faggot who makes music. It's like it's preaching to the choir with me to talk about Homestuck and making music and being mad and shit like that. Like, that's just me. That's just who the fuck I am. And I love that. Let me get away from the lyrics for a little bit, because the lyrics are very easy to obsess with when it comes to this record, because it's so, like, funny. Like, it's funny, it's awkward, it's a little bit gross, it's fun. It's a lot of fun. That's the thing I will definitely say about this record. It's fun. You might not find it fun, but on some small level, you have to be like, okay, that's cool. Sonically, musically, this record is all over the fucking place, and I appreciate that. It kind of shows how this new, I don't want to call it hyper punk, because good God, music critics just love coming up with terms, don't they? But this more, let's just call it combination of underground internet culture and underground IRL music culture, kind of coming together and mashing in on itself. I'll get more into that later. That's probably the theme I'm going to end on. But there's everything in this record. There are folk punk acoustic jams with lyrics going by so fast that you don't really know what's going on, but you get the general vibe, the emotional feel. There are cute lo-fi bedroom pop songs that are touching and sweet and almost a little bit too kind and feel kind of out of place on the record. But I like that. I like that contrast. There's high energy punk ballads. There are punk ballads that change to a different punk song in the middle of them. There's harsh noise pop segments of the record. It goes everywhere that it wants to go and feels like it needs to go to be able to get out its central ideas of I'm an anxious mess, I'm angry at the world, and I feel like a failure. And all of that rings true. It's so... I don't want to say, because I feel like this is something music critics say all the fucking time, but like, it feels like ADHD. Like, the motherfuckers be saying that shit and either don't have ADHD or... like, It's bad, and this is coming from someone with ADHD, but it's like it doesn't necessarily feel that way. It feels like, or not even manic. It just feels like it has so many things to say and so many different ways that it wants to approach the subject. It really does something for me, and the themes of burnout, failure, sexual intrigue, and stuff like that is matched by the production, for me at least. Most songs feel like they're kind of falling apart. The vocal production in particular is great. It's often completely out of tune, rushing a little bit, dragging a little bit. The vocal doublings are almost entirely out of sync, adding to the chaotic and frantic nature of the entire thing. It really feels real. It feels real. In the case of this, it's like, typically I don't like vocals being too far or behind. I'm a little bit of a stickler when it comes to that. But, oh my goodness, does it work here, because it's what it's going for. It's going for that manic, I don't want to call it purposefully amateur sound, but more like it's trying to emulate, like I said in the last video, I wrote haikus about cannibalism in your yearbook video. It's replicating a realness. It doesn't want to come off as fake or overproduced. It's purposefully undermining itself to be able to create a more relatable sound for people like me. And I love that. And I love the low... Like, and there's so many sections in here where it's something new I want to call modern lo-fi. Where there are segments of this record where you can hear it almost sounds like it was recorded over Discord, or like just on somebody's shitty iPhone or something like that, where the audio quality is noticeably not like this. It's noticeably not like an actual microphone plugged into an interface with effects on it, but it's not so lo-fi as, like, where's my record? 1 second. Give me a moment. There she is. There, no. Where it sounds lo-fi is something like this, where like this shitty cassette player from the 80s has like the batteries are nearly out on this, and it sounds so shitty and warbly. Like you even just lightly hit it and the entire cassette goes nuts. I adore that sound. I think it sounds really good, but the lo-fi aesthetic that it's going for isn't, compared to something like, let's say, the like lo-fi sounds of an album like, let's just say Lil Kid's Logic songs. That's just what popped into my brain. Where the tape recording on that definitely does add to a heightened sense of realism within the world of that record. Here it sounds like unremarkable almost. We're so used to, like, if you've been on TikTok for more than like an hour, you have heard like the shitty phone mic quality. Hell, if you ever been on a phone call, you've heard that shitty mic quality. It rings out a lot more true and faithful to the world, and it gives the lyrics more power and more intrigue, and the lyrics are already so intriguing and powerful on their own that the music only helps it. And in terms of like the themes of the lyrics, it also goes all over the place. I mentioned earlier that there are, love songs about like, oh, I wish you felt the same way I felt about you so I could hurt you, but also songs about being somebody's cute woo T-girl trophy wife. But there's the ending of this album kind of does a reversal and has a very positive message about how important change is, and how if you have the ability to change, that's the best gift you can have, which I really like a lot. But I don't want to undermine the climax of this record, the last track, because it's really good. But oh my gosh, so much of this record is so silly and grimy and gross. It's cute in a way if you're weird like me. I find it cute personally. Songs about getting fucked up, and wanting to create a list of everybody that you want to kill, or like for in particular for the song like looking at Monster Cat Rule 34. Flaw again. Song titles on point, album title on point. It's fantastic.
Yeah, fuck it. I'm too depressed to create a new Discord account to better organize a niche fetish meetup out. Old are you, 28, cool. I just turned 18. I've waited for this moment since I was 9, and also I just broke down to subs over a song I've heard 100 times, but
it feels, I don't even know how to say it. Maybe it's just me. Like, I feel like this record wasn't made, like, specifically for me, but it was made with me in mind, of just these, of weird, fucked up queer people who express themselves in weird internet ways. I mean, this album has YouTube poop references that I recognize, and talks about Homestuck and just dumb shit like that. It feels very internet-based, and this is, like, the big point that I wanted to get to, so maybe I'll just create a timestamp where it's just, like, fibbing around the point. One of the genres that I think I'm a dumbass when it comes to genres. I feel like I haven't listened to anything. But one of the genres that I have been the least attentive about really exploring and understanding is digital hardcore. Digital hardcore, for those that don't know, hell, I barely even know, but it was an attempt to kind of try and do a punk rock sound within the realm of electronic music that didn't end up sounding like, well, a lot of electronic music during the mid-2000s. I think that's when the genre started. Could have been the early 2000s. Hardcore itself, the music genre, was birthed out of punk rock in California and Washington, D.C. After both genres after punk kind of died out a little bit. It's interesting to see kind of the birth and development from post-punkers like Television or Public Image Ltd. Turning into Black Flag and Minor Threat and Husker Du and groups like that, where the hardcore punk sound ended up sounding a lot different than something like Marquee Moon. Anyways, one of the things that I found so interesting in reading the book about hardcore, Our Band Could Be Your Life, well, not the book, a book about hardcore music, about reading Our Band Could Be Your Life, was how do-it-yourself it all was in a time before you could really think about doing that. The do-it-yourself ethos of having your own record label to produce you and your friends' records, and going to the printing house and doing all that stuff, saving up money to get your records recorded in the first place. It was all so fascinating to hear, and I think it's really interesting to bring it into today, because you have people like, I'll just say Rick Beato, because that's the easy one to say. You have people like Rick Beato who are like asking questions like, where is today's Bohemian Rhapsody, or where is today's Stairway to Heaven, and stuff like that. And what he means is, where's the next rock group that is going to emulate, that's going to take from these bands and turn it into new rock music. But I think that's kind of looking at it the wrong way. To quote another figure in music, Mark Fisher, the span from the 70s to the 90s is hilarious in terms of musical technology development. His main example, you show somebody a jungle track from the 70s, they will have no clue how it was made. And you could even point out the parts that make sense. You could say, okay, well, you see this part here, this is a break from a James Brown song. And then the person from the 70s would be like, oh yeah, I know who James Brown is. And this is, okay, now this is a sine wave. And they'll go, and they might know what that is. Shaky that they might know what that is. Because electronic music was so new during that time. It showed just how much music had changed in just the span of 20 years, not just in terms of what was popular, but what could be made. But I think also what's important in Fisher's analysis of music is technology rates happening, because you don't have jungle music without having house music before it. And you don't have house music without things like Disco Demolition that I don't want to say disco. I feel like music historians really put Disco Demolition on a high pedestal and saying, like, after this, music changed forever. It didn't, but it changed in certain ways in terms of disco music becoming a little bit less mainstream, and a lot of the queer and colored people who made... Is colored a bad thing to say? I'm gonna do that again just in case. I feel like a lot of quick side note, I feel like a lot of music historians really overemphasize how important Disco Demolition is. Like, I don't think it was the thing that made disco fall out of mainstream consciousness, but it definitely was important. And you see in many stories about the creation of house music how a lot of Black and Latin and queer people kind of saw that most of the records being destroyed weren't disco. They were just albums with not white people on the front covers, and kind of took a note and went more underground, which led to places like Paradise Garage and led to DJs like Frankie Knuckles and Larry Levan getting more and more popular in these mostly queer nightclubs. Anyways, but that's enough about house. What's important is that the wave of house DJs and artists that came after places like Paradise Garage were already set up were mainly creating music with technology that had been relegated to pawn shops as commercial failures. Look at something like the TR-303, one of the most important synthesizers ever. And it was a huge commercial failure for Roland because it was sold as something that could accompany you while you're practicing. It was basically a helper baseline robot. And it didn't really sell all that well. So they flooded the pawn shops. And when these kids that went to nightclubs or were DJing in the first place said, I want to make my own records, what did they do? Well, they found the cheapest shit available, and they started making music with that stuff. And now the TR-303s go for fuck you amounts of money on places like Reverb. My light's dying. I use a battery-powered lithium light because I'm weird like that. Anyways, I still have enough time, though, right? How much time do I have left? Okay, I have like 8 minutes. I have to speed up my lecture. Anyways, so with that, we then see more of a push. I don't want to say that house music was punk rock, because what is punk is a question that can split the universe in half. What I want to say is that technology really showed that monetary restraints really influence music in ways that I think we don't talk about enough. In that book, Our Band Could Be Your Life, there were talks about the guitars that these new bands had to buy, and they were buying weird Fenders that no guitar god really championed. They were just kind of these weird fucking instruments that were good and you could play on, but they didn't have that iconoclast of a Strat or a Tele or a Les Paul or an SG. And moving a little bit further into the 2000s, moving further even, let's just go ahead and skip all the way to the point in the 2020s. You can get, if you know how to torrent, I should specify, if you know how to torrent or if you make a bunch of fake accounts, you can have Ableton Live, which costs about $800 for free. And you can download so many plugins. You can get a whole studio for relatively little to nothing if you know what you're doing. I don't, so I've spent a fair bit of coin. And then you just need to get an interface, which can cost you about $200, and then just get like an SM58 or a 57. Or hell, you can go even cheaper than that. I've heard people make good music with Blue Yetis before, and that only costs like $150, I think. Like, not an SM58 is cheaper, but then you don't need the whole audio interface. Anyways, what I'm saying is that in terms of like where's punk today, this album is punk rock. This album is hilariously punk rock. It's in your face, it's abrasive, it's lo-fi, but it doesn't really use any of the trappings of punk. There's not a lot of power chord segments, but like it just really opened my mind, because with hyperpop kind of, what made hyperpop important to me, at least, was not that it sounded weird or that it used pitched up vocals. It was because it demanded a recontextualization of every genre that people thought was too niche to ever actually be important. Nobody thought Nightcore was going to be important. Nobody thought that we would have to remember Nightcore and look at it as an influence on other things. Then 100 Gex came out and everyone immediately went, what are they doing? We don't think of happy hardcore as being something that requires too much mental bandwidth unless you are talking about a lot of these hyperpop producers. A lot of these genres that were just kind of silly one-off things for a small period of time, or memes, are incredibly important, way more important than we give them credit for. And this album, which I think could fit into digital hardcore rather well, even though most digital hardcore tracks seem to focus a lot more on drum and bass and kind of can be seen as a predecessor to more experimental out there genres like breakcore. And I'm not talking about like that depressive breakcore. I'm talking more about like in terms of your sewer sluts, I'm talking more about the weirdo breakcore people. I just find it so fascinating. I think this is where, like, if we are looking for where punk is going in the future, it's going in directions like this. Punk remains the music that is used by people who feel marginalized by society, who feel like they can't fit the pop idols of the world, even though pop idols now are people like Sophie. Like, even as the weirdos are rising up in the ranks to become pop stars, I think we are going to see more and more punk music not really have guitars in them, because a guitar costs like, what, $200? That's as much as an audio interface does, and if you know what you're doing, you can get all the crazy sounds in the world in your computer. Yet we still keep that lo-fi punk sound with stuff like that. It's so fascinating. This album has made my brain, like, I'm going ba-ba-ba-ba. Like, my brain has been going at 100 miles per hour listening to this record, thinking of what the future holds, not just for punk rock, but for queer expression and for music. This album, I don't want to say it feels ahead of the times. Like, that's one of the things. People say that hyperpop is music of the future. It's not. That's the thing that makes hyperpop so much more interesting than it can. That's the thing that makes hyperpop so interesting to me. Hyperpop is the music of now. And even though this album is already 3 years old, it feels so modern, so today, and so ingrained in now that I don't even care if the references are going to get old. It feels like such a testament to what today is, not just for queer musical artists, but for more hardcore out there music anyways, and that's why it means the world to me.